Mirrors don't lie, at least. That's what we've always been told. But what if your reflection wasn't really you? What if it moved first, smiled when you didn't, or even tried to take your place? Tonight, we open the door to 5 chilling true mirror horror stories that will change the way you look at your reflection forever. From antique mirrors with violent histories to rituals that refuse to end. These are the tales that remind us, sometimes, what stares back isn't you at all. Stay with me until the end, because the last story may haunt you long after the video ends. It began in the most ordinary way. A Saturday morning. Sunshine. The smell of pancakes drifting from the kitchen. The miller, his wife Claire, and their 13-year-old daughter Emma had spent the morning browsing an estate sale in their town. The house belonged to an elderly couple who had passed away, and their belongings were laid out in every room, like an open museum of forgotten lives. Emma wandered upstairs, bored, while her parents haggled over a set of dishes. That's when she saw it. A mirror. It leaned against the wall of the master bedroom, towering almost 7 feet tall, framed in heavy dark wood. The frame was covered in carving swirling vines, strange symbols, even faces that looked more pained than decorative. Emma called her parents. "Look at this," she said. "It's kind of creepy, but kind of cool." Claire hesitated. "I don't know. It's beautiful, but it looks heavy." The seller offered it for $50. "It's been in the house for decades," he said. "No one remembers exactly where it came from." David, always the practical one, saw an opportunity. "It'll look great in the hallway. Makes the house feel bigger. And Emma likes it." They bought it. At first, it was just a mirror. Shiny, reflective, a little dusty. But on the 3rd night, Emma woke her parents. Her voice was shaking. "I heard someone whispering my name," she said. It came from the hallway. David checked, half asleep. Nothing. The house was quiet. "Dreams," he muttered. "You're fine." But the next night, Emma heard it again. A low, dragging voice. Soft, almost kind. "Emma." She covered her head with a blanket, waiting until the whisper faded. By the end of the week, she refused to walk past the mirror. At night, Claire, worried, suggested moving it to the basement. But David insisted. It was just Emma's imagination. "Mirrors don't talk," he said. Then something strange happened. One morning, Claire noticed faint scratches inside the glass. Not across the surface, but beneath it, like they were etched from the other side. Thin lines at first, then curves, and then, unmistakably, letters. E-M-M-A. Her daughter's name. Claire's blood went cold. She rubbed the glass with cleaner, thinking maybe it was just a reflection of something nearby. But the scratches didn't fade. They deepened, as though someone had carved them from within. David laughed nervously when she told him. "Probably just imperfections in the glass," he said. But that night, brushing his teeth, he saw something that silenced his skepticism. He glanced at the mirror across the bathroom. His reflection stared back, normal, but then, something else moved. Behind him, a pale figure, tall, with hollow eyes. Its head tilted slowly, like a puppet on strings. David spun around, heart pounding. Nothing, just the empty bathroom. He looked back at the reflection. The figure was gone. From then on, David avoided mirrors whenever possible. He didn't tell Emma or Claire what he had seen, but he didn't sleep well. He kept the lights on. Meanwhile, Emma said the whispers were louder now. She'd wake up to hear her name repeated, again and again, like a chant. Sometimes, she said, the mirror didn't show her reflection at all. Just darkness, like a doorway into another place. One evening, Claire found Emma standing motionless in front of the mirror. "Sweetheart?" she asked. Emma didn't answer. Her eyes were locked on her reflection, and then Claire noticed the reflection was smiling. But Emma's face was completely still. She screamed, pulled her daughter away, covered the mirror with a sheet. They decided to get rid of it, but the mirror didn't make it easy. When David and a neighbor tried to move it to the curb, it felt heavier than before, almost impossibly heavy, as though it had rooted itself to the floor. The neighbor joked, it was like the house didn't want to let go. Finally, they gave up. They left it where it was, draped in its sheet. But that night, the mirror shattered on its own. A thunderous crash echoed through the house, waking everyone. Shards of glass covered the hallway floor. David swore he heard something beneath the sound of breaking glass. A scream? Or maybe laughter. They swept up the pieces, dumped them in the trash, thought it was finally over. But a week later, Claire was cleaning when she heard Emma talking in her room. "Who are you talking to, honey?" she asked. Emma froze. No one. But on Emma's desk, there was a shard of the mirror. Sharp, jagged, reflecting light even in the dim room. "Where did you get this?" Claire demanded. Emma looked down. It just showed up. The final proof came from their baby monitor. They had left one in the hallway to keep an eye on their dog. One night, reviewing the recording, David almost dropped the camera on the screen. In the middle of the night, there was a voice, faint at first, then louder, whispering each of their names. Emma, Claire, David, over and over and over again. They never kept a mirror in the house after that, but Emma still says, sometimes, at night, she hears it. That same soft voice, calling her name. It was supposed to be just another stop on the road. For Jason, a traveling salesman, late-night hotels were nothing unusual. A different bed, a different town, and always the same cheap carpets and faint smell of cleaning chemicals. But the Rosewood Inn was different. He had never heard of it before. Yet, when he searched for a vacancy on his phone at 1:15 a.m., it appeared at the top of the list. Vacancy rooms available, $45 a night. The address was barely a mile away. Tired and desperate for sleep, Jason followed the map through empty streets. The inn stood at the edge of town, half hidden behind overgrown trees. A single neon sign buzzed faintly. Rosewood Inn. Inside, the lobby looked frozen in time, like the 1970s had never ended. Yellowed wallpaper, a flickering chandelier, and a clerk behind the counter who didn't say much. He just slid a key across the desk, his fingers pale and bony. "Room 6, the clerk said. "Upstairs." Jason carried his suitcase down a narrow hallway. The air smelled stale, heavy, like old books and damp wood. Room 6 was ordinary at first glance. A bed, a dresser, a small bathroom. But against the far wall, covering almost the entire surface, was a mirror. Huge, unsettlingly clean. Jason chuckled nervously. "Guess I'll see a lot of myself tonight." He dropped his bag, changed clothes, and climbed into bed. Within minutes, exhaustion pulled him under. At 3:09 a.m., Jason woke up. The room was cold. Too cold. His breath came out in faint mist, even though the air conditioner wasn't running. And then he saw it, in the mirror, across from his bed, his reflection, still lying down, still asleep. But Jason was sitting up, his heart pounded. He rubbed his eyes, certain it was a trick of the light. But when he looked again, his reflection hadn't moved. It was still there, chest rising and falling, as though the mirror had trapped a sleeping version of him. Jason whispered, "What the hell?" And that's when the reflection opened its eyes. Asterisk, asterisk. He froze. The mirrored version of himself slowly turned its head toward him. Its movements were stiff, unnatural, like it hadn't moved in years. And then, it smiled. Not Jason's smile. Too wide, too sharp. Jason stumbled out of bed, nearly tripping over his suitcase. "This isn't real," he muttered. "I'm dreaming." But the reflection stood up, too moving in perfect unison, except its eyes were wrong. They were dark, hollow. Jason threw a towel over the mirror. His hands shook as he forced himself back into bed. staring at the covered glass until exhaustion overtook him again. In the morning, sunlight spilled into the room. Jason laughed at himself, embarrassed. Just a nightmare, he thought. Too much caffeine on the road. But the towel was on the floor, and on the inside of the mirror, into the glass with something sharp, were 4 words. Don't leave tonight. Jason bolted downstairs, ready to demand answers from the clerk. But the lobby was empty, the desk unattended. He slammed his key on the counter and stormed outside, except the lot was empty. His car was gone. Panicked, he ran around the building, only to find endless forest where the road should have been. No signs, no traffic, just trees stretching into fog. By the time he found his way back to the lobby, the clerk was there again, smiling faintly. You'll want to stay another night, he said. Room 6 is ready for you. Jason didn't argue. He couldn't. Something in the man's eyes pinned him in place, heavy and suffocating. That night, back in room 6, the mirror was uncovered. Waiting, Jason sat on the bed, shaking, staring at his reflection. This time it mimicked him perfectly. Every movement, every blink dot, until midnight. Then the reflection stopped. Jason lifted his hand. His reflection didn't move. It only stared. And then, from within the mirror, another figure stepped into view. Not him, not human. A shadow with long fingers that stretched across the glass, tapping softly, like testing for weakness. Tap, 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 tap. Jason ran for the door. It wouldn't open. He slammed his shoulder against it, screaming. Behind him, glass cracked. A whisper filled the room. Not his reflection this time. Something deeper. Stay. The next morning, housekeeping entered room 6 to find the bed made, the mirror spotless, and no trace of a guest. Jason's car was never located. His phone pinged 1 miles away. On a back road no longer listed on any map, locals say the Rosewood Inn doesn't exist anymore. They tore it down in the 1980s after a series of disappearances. But sometimes, very late at night, travelers still see its neon sign glowing faintly in the fog. And if you ever check in, whatever you do, don't look too long into the mirror. They say children see things adults can't, but sometimes, the things they see aren't meant to be seen at all. It started with a dare for high school kids. Lily, Marcus, and Jordan snuck into Fairview Elementary, a school abandoned since the early 1990s. Fairview had been closed after a fire, gutted one of the classrooms. No one died, at least not officially, but rumors swirled about kids who never came home, about voices that echoed in the gym at night, about a principal who hung himself in his office. The place was fenced off, but every teenager in town knew a loose panel near the back. The dare was simple. Spend 10 minutes inside, take a picture for proof, and walk out with bragging rights. What they didn't know was that the fire hadn't touched everything. 1 room, 12 remained, almost untouched. And inside that room, standing tall against the blackened wall, was a mirror. The 4 teens crept through the dusty hallways, their flashlights bouncing over peeling paint and broken desks. Creepy, but not scary, Marcus whispered. Yet, Lily added, when they reached room 12, they stopped. Unlike the rest of the school, this classroom looked preserved. The floor wasn't warped, the paint wasn't burned, and at the far end, covered in a thin veil of dust, stood the mirror. It was tall and arched, like something from a church. Its frame was blackened wood, but the glass was spotless, too clean for an abandoned building. Take the picture, Jordan said, his voice shaky. Ethan raised his phone and snapped one, but when they checked the screen, the photo was wrong. The classroom was there. The mirror was there, but none of them appeared in the picture. Lily stepped closer. That's impossible. She waved her hand in front of the mirror. The glass reflected her movement perfectly, but on her phone, nothing. Ethan tried again, this time filming. He pointed the camera toward the mirror as Lily stood in front of it. Through the lens, the mirror was empty, just the classroom. No, Lily, okay? That's freaky, Marcus muttered. Then Lily gasped. What? Ethan asked. She pointed at the mirror. That's not me. They looked. Her reflection was standing there, but it wasn't moving like her. Lily had stepped back, but her reflection stayed in place. Slowly, it tilted its head and smiled. Panic surged. Jordan grabbed Lily's arm, pulling her away. We're leaving now. But as they turned, the door slammed shut with a deafening bang. Ethan rattled the knob. Locked. The air grew thick, heavy with the smell of smoke. In the distance, a faint school bell rang even though the building had no power. Then came the voices, children's laughter, echoing from the mirror. Dozens of tiny hands pressed against the glass from the other side, leaving smudges. Marcus dropped his flashlight. The beam rolled across the floor, landing at the mirror's base. For just a second, they saw rows of children standing behind the glass, their faces pale and hollow, their eyes black pits. The mirror began to ripple. Like water disturbed by a stone, a small hand reached through. Thin fingers brushed against Lily's arm. She screamed, jerking back. Jordan tried to smash the mirror with a chair, but the wood splintered on contact. The glass didn't crack. Instead, ripples spread wider, and the reflection of the classroom darkened into something else: ash, flames, and charred walls. It was the fire. The fire that had supposedly ended decades ago. And in that burning reflection, figures writhed in the smoke, reaching toward the living. Ethan's phone buzzed violently in his pocket. He pulled it out. Dozens of new photos had appeared on his screen. All of them of himself, but not as he was now. Dead, burned, screaming. Jordan grabbed the loose panel of plywood covering the window and ripped it free. Out, now, he shouted. Lily scrambled through first, then Marcus. Ethan followed, clutching his phone like it might explain everything later. But when they turned back, Jordan wasn't there. The classroom was empty. The mirror reflected nothing. Ethan's phone buzzed again. One new photo. Jordan, standing inside the burning classroom, pounding on the glass from the wrong side. They never found Jordan. Police dismissed the story. They said the kids were panicked, disoriented, and Jordan probably ran off or fell somewhere in the building. But no trace of him was ever found. The school was demolished the following year. Room 12, along with its mirror, was reduced to rubble. But Ethan still has the photos on his phone. He's shown them to friends, to skeptics, to anyone who thinks he's lying. Every picture looks normal until you tilt the screen at just the right angle, and then, just for a moment, you can see Jordan's face, pressed against the glass, still screaming to get out. In every small town, there are rules. Some are written on signs, others whispered in the dark. And in Hollow Creek, the rule was simple. Never answered the knock at midnight. Emma Cole had just moved to Hollow Creek, a town so small it didn't even have a stoplight. She'd inherited her grandmother's old farmhouse, sitting just beyond the woods. The neighbors were friendly enough until she mentioned the knocking at the grocery store. When she casually joked, "Someone knocked on my door at midnight last night," the cashier froze. The man behind her dropped his bag of flour. An older woman pulled Emma aside, her voice trembling. "Listen to me carefully. Don't open the door. Don't speak through it. And whatever you do, don't look out the window." Emma laughed it off. Probably just kids playing pranks. Small towns were full of silly superstitions. But deep down, she noticed the way everyone's smiles dropped whenever she brought it up. The house was quiet that night, crickets chirping in the distance. At exactly midnight, a sharp knock-knock rattled her front door. Emma froze in bed. Another 3 knocks followed, steady, patient. She sat up, her phone glowing in her hand. She thought about calling the sheriff, but then remembered what the old woman had said. Don't answer. Don't look. So she stayed in bed, heart pounding, until the sound stopped. By morning, she convinced herself it was a dream. The second night, it came again. Knock, knock, knock. This time Emma crept down the stairs. She stood in the hallway, her breath held. The door just a few feet away. Silence. Then another knock so hard, the wood shuddered. Her hand hovered near the knob. Curiosity gnawed at her. She wanted to know who it was. Then she remembered the warning. She stepped back. She didn't open it, but she couldn't resist peeking through the side window. Just one quick glance. Her blood ran cold. There was a man standing there. He was tall, dressed in old-fashioned clothes, like something from the 1940s. His hat was pulled low, hiding most of his face. He stood perfectly still, one hand resting on the doorframe. But what unsettled Emma most wasn't his stillness, it was his shadow. It stretched far too long, curling unnaturally across the porch as if it were reaching for her. She stumbled back from the window. By the time she dared to look again, he was gone. The next day, Emma pressed her neighbor, Mr. Harris, for answers. He was in his 70s. One of those people who knew the town's history better than the courthouse. His face paled when she asked. He hesitated, then finally spoke. They called him the Midnight Man, Harris said. Back in the 40s, there was a drifter who went door to door asking for shelter. Folks turned him away. One night, in the dead of winter, he froze to death on the outskirts of town. Since then, he's been knocking, always knocking, looking for someone to let him in. Emma laughed nervously. So you all believe a ghost goes door to door? Harris's voice hardened. Believe what you want, but everyone who's opened that door isn't here to laugh about it anymore. By the third night, Emma's nerves were fraying. She went to bed early, hoping to sleep through it, but at midnight right on schedule came the knock, 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 knock. She buried her head under the pillow. Knock, knock, knock. She pressed her hands over her ears. Then came a whisper. Faint but clear, sliding through the cracks of the door. Let me in. It's so cold out here. Emma bolted upright. She stared at the door from the staircase, her whole body shaking. The voice wasn't angry. It was pleading, sad. Human. Her heart ached against her better judgment. What if it wasn't a ghost? What if it was someone real who needed help? She crept down the stairs, one slow step at a time. The knocks grew louder, more urgent. When she reached the door, her hand trembled over the knob. Who are you? She whispered. The knocking stopped. A pause. Then the voice answered. You know who I am. Emma's breath caught in her throat. She didn't recognize the voice, but deep down, she felt the truth of his words. Her grandmother had told her bedtime stories about a man who wandered Hollow Creek, knocking on doors. She'd laughed it off as folklore, but now, I just want to come inside, the voice said, almost kind. Just open the door. One night is all I ask. Emma squeezed her eyes shut. No. For a long moment, there was silence. Then, in a whisper that slid under her skin, the voice said, Then I'll wait. For the next week, the knocking came every night. Midnight. Without fail, Emma stopped sleeping. Her eyes grew hollow, her nerves frayed. She tried blasting music, but she could still hear it through walls, through floors, inside her own skull. Finally, she packed a bag. She drove out of town, vowing never to return. But the Midnight Man wasn't finished with her. In her new apartment, 2 states away, she finally felt safe. The first night, she slept soundly, until at exactly midnight, knock, 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 she froze. Her blood turned to ice. Slowly, she turned toward the door. There, stretching across the carpet in the moonlight, was a shadow. Too long, too thin, reaching. And then came the voice. You moved, but I still found you. Emma's neighbors say she vanished less than a week after moving in. Her apartment was left untouched, her belongings still neatly packed. The only sign she left behind was the front door wide open at midnight, and every tenant who's lived there since claims the same thing. At exactly midnight, the knocking begins. Every town has its quirks, a strange law, a local myth, or an odd tradition that outsiders find amusing. But the town of Grayson Hollow had one rule that wasn't amusing at all. There were no dogs anywhere. When Marcus drove through Grayson Hollow on a road trip, he noticed something strange. Every yard had children playing, cats lounging on porches, even the occasional horse tethered out front. But not a single dog. He stopped at a diner for coffee and asked the waitress about it. "Funny question," he said. "I've been here 2 hours, and I haven't seen one dog. Not even a stray." The waitress's smile faltered. She leaned closer. "We don't talk about dogs here." Marcus laughed, thinking she was joking. But the longer he stayed, the more unsettling it became. No barking at night. No leashes hanging in garages. Not even a doghouse in any yard. It was as if dogs had never existed in this place. That evening, Marcus asked his motel clerk why. The man gave him a hard look and said, "If you're smart, you'll leave before dark." But Marcus's curiosity was stronger than his fear. He stayed. At midnight, he woke to a strange sound outside his motel window. It wasn't barking, it was something lower. A guttural growl, long and distorted, vibrating through the walls. Then came the scratching, dozens of claws scraping against the pavement. Marcus peeked through the blinds, and that's when he understood why the town had no dogs out in the street. Under the dim orange glow of the streetlights, shapes moved, not dogs, things, wearing the shape of dogs. Their bodies were too thin, their legs bending wrong at the joints. Their heads twitched unnaturally, like broken marionettes. Eyes glowed pale white, and their mouths stretched far too wide, lined with teeth that glistened wet in the dark. They moved in a pack, silent except for the occasional scrape of claws. Against asphalt, one of them lifted its head and sniffed the air, and then, every single one turned toward Marcus's window. Marcus's heart nearly stopped. He ducked down, holding his breath. A low growl rumbled outside the glass. A nose pressed against the window pane, smearing it with fog. He dared not move. Minutes crawled by before the creatures finally padded away into the night. By morning, Marcus packed up and fled Grayson Hollow without even checking out of the motel. Later, when he tried to look up the town's history, he found only scraps. Old newspaper clippings from the 1920s spoke of a rabid pack that wiped out all the dogs in town. Locals whispered it wasn't rabies at all, bet something that came through the woods one winter and never left. Now, generations later, the town survives by one rule: no dogs allowed, because the things that prowl the streets at night are still hungry. And that was tonight's journey into darkness. From haunted highways to towns with rules no outsider should ever break. These stories remind us that horror doesn't just lurk in abandoned asylums or distant forests. Sometimes, it's waiting in the very places we call home. If you made it this far, you're one of the brave ones. But tell me, which story left you the most unsettled tonight? Was it the cult on the highway, the midnight man's knock, or the town where no dogs remain? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. And remember, if you enjoyed this, don't forget to like the video, subscribe to Story Villa, and tap the bell so you never miss another night of true